let us open the file they did not want you to see. It dates back to the winter of 1976, buried deep within the archives of agricultural research, a document that should have ended the age of petrochemical farming. A rogue physicist, working outside the sanctioned boundaries of biological science, achieved the impossible. He grew stalks of corn 18 feet tall on a plot of land that was effectively barren. There were no synthetic nitrates used, no genetically modified seeds, no industrial pesticides. According to the data, the crop yield was not double, not triple, but 800% higher than the control group reliant on standard commercial fertilizers. This was not a gardening miracle, it was a threat to the global economic order. The moment these findings threatened to go public, the machinery of the industrial status quo engaged. A technology that could allow a farmer to generate massive abundance for the cost of a few dollars of rock dust was unacceptable to a consortium of nitrate manufacturers who had just spent billions converting wartime munitions factories into fertilizer plants. The report was labeled an anomaly. The methodology was ridiculed as pseudoscience, and the physicist was pushed into obscurity. But they could not destroy the physics. They ignored the fundamental truth that this man had discovered. Soil is not merely a chemical holding tank for NPK. It is a complex radio receiver. The 18-foot corn was not feeding on chemical salts. It was feeding on atmospheric energy, tuned in by a specific geological mixture that acted as an antenna. They buried the man, but they forgot to bury the stones. The man at the center of this suppression was Dr. Philip Callahan, a name you will not find in modern agricultural textbooks, though his shadow looms large over the physics of life. Callahan was not your typical farmer. He was a master of radio frequencies, a skill honed during World War II, where he managed secret radio stations and navigation systems. While his peers were looking down at the dirt with microscopes, trying to count bacteria, Callahan was looking at the landscape with the eyes of a radio engineer. He traveled to the ancient round towers of Ireland, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, and the sacred stupas of the East. Archaeologists dismissed these structures as mere religious monuments, piles of rock stacked by superstitious primitives. Callahan saw something else entirely. He saw schematic diagrams. He saw dielectric antennae. He discovered that these ancient builders were not praying to stone. They were utilizing a sophisticated understanding of geology to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum. He brought his instruments to these sites and found that the rocks used were not random. They were highly paramagnetic, stones that hold a weak attraction to magnetic fields but do not retain magnetism themselves. Callahan realized that these towers were designed to capture cosmic energy, specifically the extra-low frequency, ELF, radio waves generated by lightning strikes thousands of miles away. This was the invisible science in action. The ancients were harvesting the heartbeat of the planet, pulling atmospheric voltage down into the soil to stimulate plant growth. Callahan proved that the most fertile soils in history were not just chemical swamps. They were geological receivers, tuned perfectly to the frequency of the Earth itself. To understand why this knowledge was buried, you must look at the timeline. The end of World War II left the industrial powers with a massive problem. They had built an empire of factories dedicated to fixing nitrogen for explosives, and suddenly, the demand for bombs evaporated. They had to sell this chemical surplus or face economic collapse. The solution was brilliant and devastating. They rebranded the ingredients of warfare as the ingredients of life. They told the world that soil was nothing more than an empty sponge, needing only 3 chemical inputs: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to function. This was the great chemical lie, a reductionist trap that blinded generations of farmers to the complex biophysics of the earth. By flooding the fields with synthetic salts, they did not just fertilize the crops. They fundamentally altered the electrical nature of the ground. These harsh chemical salts are electrolytes of the wrong kind. They short-circuit the subtle magnetic flows in the soil and dehydrate the microscopic life that sustains the humus. It is a salt earth strategy, whether intentional or accidental. When you apply these petrochemicals, you get a quick flush of green growth, but it is a hollow victory. The plants are water-bloated, weak, and completely disconnected from the earth's natural immunity, making them easy prey for pests. This conveniently creates a secondary market for pesticides, another product sold by the very same companies. They broke the soil's natural antenna, and for 70 years, they have been selling you the crutches to keep the crippled system walking. We must now decode the invisible science that the fertilizer companies ignored. To understand how a plant truly feeds, you have to stop thinking in terms of chemistry and start thinking in terms of physics. The engine of this growth is a force called paramagnetism. Unlike the magnets on your refrigerator, which are ferromagnetic and permanently magnetized, paramagnetic materials, specifically volcanic rocks, are sensitive to external magnetic fields. They do not hold the charge. They resonate with it. They are the tuning forks of the soil. This resonance is not accidental. At any given moment, there are nearly 2,000 lightning storms raging across the globe, striking the earth hundreds of times per second. These strikes do not just disappear. They ring the planet like a bell, creating a standing electromagnetic wave known as the Schumann resonance. This is the heartbeat of the earth. Dr. Callahan discovered that high paramagnetic soil acts as a massive transceiver for these extra low frequency, ELF, radio waves. When this atmospheric energy hits the volcanic rock in the soil, it is not lost. Through a physical phenomenon, this radio energy is transduced, converted, into tiny pulses of light in the root zone. Your plants are not just drinking water. They are literally consuming photons generated underground. This is the difference between dead, dirt, and living soil. One is a silent graveyard of chemicals. The other is an oscillating energy field, humming with the power of 1,000 distant storms. Now we begin the reconstruction. To build a soil that functions as an antenna, you cannot simply grab dirt from the backyard. You must assemble the correct hardware. The primary component, the very backbone of this system, is high paramagnetic basalt. This is not the sterile silica sand you find at a playground, which is diamagnetic, meaning it actually repels magnetic fields. Silica is an insulator. It blocks the flow. We need the opposite. We need rock dust that has emerged from the mantle of the earth, cooled rapidly, and locked in the alignment of the planet's magnetic poles. You are looking for volcanic basalt, often sold cheaply as lava sand or rock dust in quarries, completely unrecognized for its energetic potential. However, not all rock is created equal, and this is where the industry fails. The metric you must hunt for is the CGS value, centimeter gram second, a unit measuring magnetic susceptibility. Dr. Callahan's research established that a value of 3,000 CGS is the threshold for high-energy soil, yet most commercial potting mixes barely register a 100. To the naked eye, this material is heavy, dark, often black or deep gray, and feels denser than regular earth. It is cheap because the world sees it as waste aggregate, but to the physicist, this is the raw material of the receiver. Without this specific geological matrix, your soil is deaf to the cosmos. You must secure this basalt. for it is the foundation upon which the entire energy column will be built. We have the antenna, but an antenna without a battery is just a wire in the wind. To store this captured energy and make it available to the root system, we must construct a biological capacitor in the ground. This requires the second critical component, biochar. Do not mistake this for the ash left over from your fireplace. Biochar is a specific form of pyrolyzed organic matter, burned in a low-oxygen environment to create a crystalline carbon lattice that is virtually indestructible. Under the microscope, it looks like a honeycomb of empty rooms. In the language of physics, these are not just holes, they are electron reservoirs. This carbon structure has an incredible capacity to hold an electrical charge, acting as the negative plate of our soil battery. To activate this capacitor, we need an electrolyte, a medium that allows the current to flow. This brings us to the third and final key ingredient, sea solids. We are not talking about the bleached, toxic sodium chloride found on your dinner table. We are talking about the full spectrum of 92 elements found in the ocean, the exact same mineral profile found in human blood. When you dissolve these unrefined sea minerals into the soil moisture, you create a highly conductive solution. This is basic electrochemistry. The carbon holds the negative charge, the mineral ions carry the positive charge, and the moisture bridges the gap. By mixing these components, you are not just making dirt. You are building a low-voltage DC battery that maintains a constant electrical potential, powering the plant's metabolic engine even when the sun is not shining. We have the components, but chemistry is nothing without correct proportions. Throw them together haphazardly, and you have mud, not a machine. The formulation requires a precise golden ratio to balance the biological buffer with the energetic matrix. The blueprint for the reactor mix is simple yet non-negotiable. 50% high-quality compost, 25% paramagnetic basalt, and 25% charged biochar. The compost serves as the biological medium, the flesh that holds our skeleton together. It provides the humic acids necessary to chelate the minerals, making them accessible to the plant. Without this organic buffer, the raw energy of the rock and carbon can overwhelm delicate root hairs. The mixing process itself is a ritual of physics. You do not just toss these into a pile. You must homogenize them until the color is a uniform deep shadow. Once mixed, you activate the battery by saturating the pile with your sea solid solution, 1 teaspoon of sea minerals per gallon of water. But here is the step the amateurs skip, the reason their experiments fail, the curing phase. You cannot plant in this immediately. The mix is chemically volatile and energetically chaotic. You must cover this soil and let it sit in the dark for at least 4 weeks. During this incubation, a microscopic lattice of fungal hyphae will weave the rock and carbon together, and more importantly, the magnetic domains within the pile will begin to align. The soil is tuning itself. Only when the pile smells sweet, like the floor of an ancient forest, is the reactor ready to go online. You have built the engine, but you have not turned the key. The paramagnetic soil is sitting there, a loaded capacitor waiting for a charge. But to achieve the exponential growth observed in 1976, we must actively close the circuit. This brings us to the final piece of the physics puzzle, atmospheric coupling. We live in a giant electrical circuit. The ionosphere above our heads is positively charged, and the earth below our feet is negatively charged. Nature designed trees to bridge this gap, acting as living conductors that pull atmospheric voltage down into the ground. However, in our stunted, domesticated gardens, this connection is weak. We need to manually amplify it. This is where the controversial practice of electroculture intersects with hard physics. To trigger the full potential of your reactor mix, you must install a ground spike. This is not mystical. It is a lightning rod for subtle energy. By placing a simple copper rod or a wooden dowel wrapped in copper wire next to your plant, extending just 12 inches into the air and penetrating deep into your basalt biochar mix, you create a path of least resistance. This copper antenna captures the atmospheric potential and channels it directly into the root zone. When this positive atmospheric current hits the negative potential of the carbon basalt battery, the result is an electrolysis effect that supercharges nutrient uptake. You are no longer just growing plants. You have plugged your garden into the electric grid of the planet. The files from 1976 were suppressed, but the method escaped the laboratory. Today, a quiet network of guerrilla farmers, from the corn belts of the Midwest to the vine-choked valleys of Oregon, are proving that the physics hold true. These are not hobbyists playing with crystals. They are serious cultivators who have abandoned the chemical drip feed in favor of the Callahan method. They operate under the radar, avoiding the scrutiny of agricultural extension agents who were trained to enforce the NPK doctrine. But their results are becoming impossible to ignore. They are the modern validators of the forbidden science. The evidence they are pulling out of the ground is visceral. When you dig up a plant grown in this paramagnetic reactor mix, the difference is shocking. The root systems are not the spindly brown threads you see in conventional farming. They are massive, white, and dense, resembling fiber optic cables that have fused with the earth. These roots are 3 times the mass of the control group, driven by the intense electrical stimulation of the basalt. Above ground, the stems are so fibrous and tough that they cannot be snapped by hand, a testament to the silicon uptake that chemical fertilizers inhibit. But the most damning evidence against the industrial model is the Brix levels, the measure of sugar and mineral density in the sap. These plants register sugar levels so high that insects, which lack the liver enzymes to digest complex sugars, instinctively avoid them. The plants have developed a force field of health that renders pesticides obsolete. And when the early frosts come, these crops stand tall while the chemical neighbors wither, kept warm by the metabolic heat of a soil that is literally alive with energy. We have reached the end of the dossier. The physics is sound, the history is clear, and the method is in your hands. But the final obstacle is not agricultural. It is psychological. You are standing at a crossroads that every farmer, gardener, and human being must eventually face. On one side lies the subscription model of existence, a system designed by industrial giants to keep you tethered to their supply chain, buying their sterile seeds, their chemical salts, and their poisons every single season, renting your fertility from a corporation. On the other side lies the infinite engine of nature, a path where you build a soil that recharges itself, capturing the free energy of the universe to create abundance that asks for nothing in return but respect. The choice is yours. You can continue to treat the earth like a dead sponge that needs to be artificially pumped full of life, or you can recognize it as the living, breathing electrical system that it is. This is not just about growing a bigger tomato. It is about reclaiming the fundamental right to self-sufficiency. To mix this soil, to drive that copper spike into the ground, is an act of rebellion. It is a declaration that you will no longer be a passive consumer of their scarcity, but an active participant in the earth's abundance. The secrets have been dug up. The blueprint is free. The only question remaining is, do you have the courage to stop buying their lie and start building your own truth?